All right. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to be back in through a webinar, this time as stream. First of all, also thanks for the invitation to the Discord server. I'll be talking about developing and deploying a static web app with Blazor and Azure Functions. So very nice buzzword headline. My name is Matthias. You can say Matt. At my day job, I work at JetBrains, and in my night job, I also maintain an open source project, which is also particularly interesting because this talk actually came about. Like at first, I really just wanted to check out what Blazor Static Web App. Sorry, I will also check the Discord channel here quickly just to have a back channel. So at first I was really just checking out what static web apps can do, but later I also found that I can actually use that also in my open source project. So over time, when I gave the talk already a couple of times, then this really turned out to be one thing that I absolutely love. So static web apps are of great help for that. But let's dive in. First of all, what are static web apps? Usually, if it was in person, then I would ask if people have checked this out already. And give me 1 second, because I will also open the Solution1 chat here, just so that I can take brief looks, maybe. Just 1 second. Where is it? Solution1 here. So what are static web apps? First of all, they provide a way for you to host static content really around the world, which also leads to the fact that this is globally distributed and is very fast, will be delivered quite fast to the users who are browsing that web app. But at the same time, it also comes with integrated API support in the form of Azure Functions. And these two also provide a seamless security model. So everything, like if you want to authenticate with Google or Facebook or Twitter, or I don't know if Mastodon will follow at some point, this information is seamlessly shared between front and backend. Also, you have customizable authorization. So you can assign roles to users and allow them to browse certain resources. You can have custom domains. What else? We can have staging environments. So that means that we can test new changes in the staging environment, see if it works, and then deploy to the production. You get free SSL certificates to make everything secure. And usually, in all other talks, you would see also the integration with GitHub Actions or GitHub in general and Azure DevOps. In this talk, however, I will also sneak in my open source project a little bit. For a good reason, though. I think you will. I hope you will see why this can be of great help. But with that, let's continue. Let's go on with the talk. So again, this is prepare. Maybe I will also try to take a look in the chat for a question. With static web apps, we have a great choice of all the front-end frameworks that we can use. So we can use Angular, Vue, Svelte, React, or Blazor. So, and if you're in the chat, then it would be nice if you just type something and let me know what particular framework you're using. That would be quite interesting. Usually from other conferences, what I see is always that they React, of course. Usually what I see that either Angular or React is leading, Vue sometimes, Svelte very rarely, but also Blazor, of course. And with Blazor, we will actually continue. And really, one thing that I maybe forgot at the beginning, this is a very introductory talk. I will try to give you some nice pointers here and there, what I found out, what surprised me, or what I found noteworthy. But otherwise, it's really also a bit introductory. So Blazor, why Blazor? Well, me personally, I started with JavaScript. my whole, developer career when I was in school. But yeah, I really cannot say I like it personally. Yeah. I feel home in C# and .NET. I love the whole runtime or the whole base class library, what we can use. And Blazor is a way where you have that opportunity to use C# for the front end, which in turn runs on WebAssembly, short WASM. And that also can work because it's an open web standard. And we can still have, so you write everything in C#, we will see in a moment. We can still have interop with actual JavaScript, like libraries that you want to integrate. I didn't try that, just to note, but this is a claim of Blazor. And it has a great development experience because, yeah, we will actually see. So let me take a look here. So like in this project here on the left, you can see, I hope this is zooming, but here on the left, you can see I have a couple of projects, sorry. We will start with SWA app, so Static Web App. I wasn't taking attention when I gave the name at first, but yeah, let's see. This is our Blazor app inside here. And we can, for instance, take a look at this following example. So let me start this. I will first take a look with you what this example does, and then I will show you how it's implemented. So this is very simple, just a to-do list. Yeah. So we can add items just by typing here, hitting enter, but we can also go ahead and click on an item and it will be removed. Yeah. So now I cleared my list again. So let's take a look how this is implemented, which I found really nice. So Blazor, besides the fact that you can also extract components, etc., but otherwise Blazor is really implemented in Razor files, which probably a lot of you already know. But let's take a look at this input field, for instance. This input field is very ordinary up until here, let's say. But then afterwards, we can actually try to, or not just try, but bind a private field that we defined a little bit later to that content of that input box. We can also subscribe to an event like on keyup and define a more or less reference to that method that should handle the event. Yeah. So now when text on text input is triggered, all that we do is basically just checking if it was the enter key. If it was, then we will add the item to another list that we have defined here, and also resetting that value that is currently shown to empty, because we want to give the opportunity to add a new value. But now what we do with that list, and that list, we can just iterate inside an unordered list tag. And this is quite simple, basically a code block that we are starting here. And then for each item, this will be rendered and also re-rendered once we add new items to it. And for each item, of course, we can also hook onto the onClick event and then just provide a lambda, and that's very nice again, to remove that item from that list. So that is one example. But let me spin that up again. We can also, let's see if I should have put the breakpoint here. Yes, I did. We can also seamlessly debug. Yeah. So for instance, here, what I'm doing is just using the HTTP client, and you see this behaves like the HTTP client. Can I get the namespace again? It was showing for a moment, but now not anymore. But this is like the HTTP client that we know from, also just console applications. We can see what we got back from this API here. We can also inspect this reference to see local fields and whatnot. Yeah. So debugging also works out of the box, which is great for me because I never got along really well with the Chrome developer tools. One other example I want to show you, because this is, this is not what I wanted. Let's continue. This is really just a table that we're showing here. And I briefly mentioned it already. Blazor allows you to extract logic nicely as components, Blazor components. And there are plenty of, how to say, vendors, including commercial ones and open source vendors that provide a couple of, components that you can use to visualize data. One of these is Syncfusion, and this one here to a degree does exactly the same like with the table, but has some nice additional features. So you see in this one, we're basically just binding forecasts to our as a data source. We also allow sorting and filtering, basically just to enable, we just have to enable a Boolean. And this one here, in this case, sometimes we don't even need it. In this case, I only needed it to provide some formatting. Yeah, but otherwise, this can get the information also from display attributes, for instance. All right, so let's start this example for a moment. And let's go back to our fetch data. And now you see this is the Syncfusion component, and we could actually search here for freezing. We can also, okay, I need to enter again, but we can also sort just by clicking on that. And you can also, just bind to a database where you get your information from, all very nicely. To that, I also want to say we briefly had a webinar with Syncfusion, but again, there are plenty of open source alternatives as well, and also there's Telerik. That's one thing that I remember. But we had this webinar with someone from Syncfusion and how this works in Writer. So if you're interested in that, check it out. Yeah. So, so far for Blazor. Now I want to get over to Azure Functions. And Azure Functions is nice because it's working serverless. So what that means is we, as someone who wants to provide a function, we just write the code. The code is orchestrated on Azure side, let's say, and executed whenever there's a need for it. Yeah. Otherwise, for the hosting server, and we don't need to care. That also gives us great flexibility because let's say if your Azure function is running hot, and by that I mean a lot of users are requesting it, then this can scale. Yeah, Azure has the infrastructure for that, and it can just scale. And this also provides a powerful programming model. We will see one example, one very nice one that I really like, about where you can sneak in how values are resolved at runtime and passed as parameters. And overall, again, great development experience because it's all C#, we can debug it, etc. And code completion and whatnot. Azure Functions also works, at least I hope I don't confuse it, but with PowerShell, Java, and Python. But yeah, we will go along with C# because if you haven't seen it, if you haven't noticed yet, but we have Blazor C#, Azure Functions C#, and later we will look at C# again for deployment. So let's head over to my, where is it? Where's Writer? Here. Let's head over again and look at an Azure function. So I will stop this. And I also have a second project here, Static Web Apps API. And in that API, I've defined a function which should get a geek joke. Yeah. Don't blame me for this. I found this API. I found it nice so far, but I have no control whatsoever what joke gets returned. The only thing I could make sure is to exclude all of these, which are named here, like not safe for work, etc. But yeah, this API we will, make a request to. And then basically just unwrap the response. In this case, I think I'm also passing that I'm just interested in the text, but could also take the JSON. And sometimes I hit rate limits, then we are out of quotes. Or let's fix that, out of jokes. But otherwise, we just return it. So this is implemented in C#. So that means we can, let's say, debug it. Yeah. So let's hit the debug button. Oh no, this, of course, this always happens when we give a presentation. And I tried it, but just half an hour before, which is also nice. Anyway, so this should run. And now, usually up until a certain point, I was often using Postman and stuff like that. But with Rider, meanwhile, what we can also do is go to that function here on the left, and you need to have the Azure Functions plugin installed. But then we can choose to trigger that get geek joke function. Yeah. So we land here. And this is a really nice way also, not just for a simple get request, but we can really write something like, I was looking for something like content. Yeah, because then you'll also see that it has a lot of code completion for all kinds of stuff. So you can define headers here. You can also use, you can also pass auth tokens, bearer tokens, for instance, and reference them through some funny way, like this, for instance. Go check it out if you're interested. But otherwise, we can just trigger our API here. And we can see here we got a joke, which I can't read yet. So let me, I will not read the joke. I will just go back. You can read the joke if you want, because what I want to show you is, of course, we can set a breakpoint, then go back, just trigger this again, and I will stop here and can go through and see what's happening. If we got a joke, or what the status code was, etc. So that's it for Azure Functions. But now I want to go back and talk about the fusion of these two, to make a real Azure Static Web App. And one thing that is pretty noteworthy is the static web app config.json file, because this is really a place where you can configure all kinds of stuff, including routes, including global headers. So this was really interesting because I, for my website, for my open source project, I really needed to add global headers to allow, how's it called, analytics servers, which, by the way, is also nicely EU conform. If you haven't heard about it, it's called Fathom. And I had to provide these global headers to that so that it works. Then we can also define, and this is not the standard, by the way. So if you ever check this out, make sure to add trailing/auto, because then files will have no trailing slash and directories will have them. Of course, we can also have response overrides to redirect to our 404 page and a couple of routes. Like, for instance, in my case, I only wanted to allow login through GitHub. Also, the /logout will direct to this endpoint, which we will take a look later. And also further below, I'm actually disabling logins for Azure Active Directory and all the others like Twitter and stuff, because I was really just interested in GitHub. That also leads the way to our next topic, which is authorization and authentication. These pictures are supposed to be funny. If you haven't heard about this, http.cat lists all of the response codes. Also, if you're a doc person, I also got those from http://statusdocs.com. Yeah, very cute. But yeah, this is what we're interested in or what I want to tell you about for the rest of the talk, or most of the next couple minutes. So let's start, because this concerns both sides, but we will start with the Blazor side of authentication authorization. The first thing to know is that static web apps, when they're hosted, there will be an endpoint provided automatically for you. You don't have to do anything for that. But this endpoint looks roughly like this. So we have our base URL and then /auth/login/provider. And this provider can be anything like GitHub, Twitter, etc., or AAD for Azure Active Directory. The project also needs this particular reference. So yeah, read it on your own. To make things work, we also need to add this call to our builder in program.cs usually. And from then on, that is one thing that we also need to do one time, to add a cascading authentication state component around our around our app, plus authorize route view in app. Yeah. And from then on, we can use two approaches to, let's say, secure content. We can either use a tag inside a single page, authorized view, with sub tags or components authorized and not authorized, or we can secure a whole page. And I want to show you how this looks in particular. So let's go back to our app here, and we have pages, and we want to secure our geek joke. Yeah, that page is basically just showing what we just looked at in the Azure function. And here for that, we to secure the whole page, we can just go here, and I'm actually just reverting that. I can say this requires is only available for authorized users, and the role should be admin to access that resource. But like I said, there's also a way to have not the whole page, but just some parts of it secured. For that, I think the most obvious example is our login area, because, and remember, those are the tags that I was talking about, because for authorized people, we really want to say, hey, then the name, and also provide the login, the logout button. But for users that are not authorized, we really want to show the login button, yeah, to allow them to log in. So those are the two ways, let's say, to put authorization into the front end. Let's continue. We also need authentication authorization for our Azure function. Why is that? Well, because if we just provided security or authentication for the front end, where's this one here? If we just had it on the page, then this would still, let me go to the page again. And then this would still allow us, or someone who's not authenticated, to just go ahead and access that API endpoint. That's still possible. So again, we really need that also for Azure Functions. And the most important entity here, let's say, is the XMS client principal header, which gets automatically populated once we logged in. And this is a JSON Web Token that we can parse, and we need to create a claims principal instance from that. So that instance, that's just a .NET object. With that, we can then go ahead and really check, is the principal the user, synonym for that? Is the user authenticated? Is the user in a certain role, like in this case, admin? And that I also want to show you very briefly. So let's go back to our geek joke. Azure function. And usually, I want to show you the usual way before. Usually it would look roughly like this, because we would need to parse it from the request. Yeah, and then we can go ahead and use that principle to check if authenticated and in the role. And otherwise, we just return unauthorized result or forbid result. But and that's the point where I say this has a nice programming model, because we can also extend the whole middle, cannot say if it's middleware, but we can extend this in a certain way that we can inject our principal as a parameter. Usually you can only inject a couple of things, built in, but we can really extend that, and we can allow it to inject this principal here. And this code for Static Web Apps principal, this is really custom code. Yeah, this is not provided, at least last time I checked, it's not provided as from the package or something. But I will also have the link at the very end, so you can check out the repository. But this is some gluing code, let's say, that will allow us to inject that. Yeah, and it will also allow us a little bit later to better test our method. Yeah, because we don't have static, data basically flying around somewhere, but we can inject it, and that's nice. So that's the Azure Functions part. Okay, now, because this is also quite important, I want to take a look with you at how this can be troubleshooted or executed locally. And for that, the Static Web App CLI is really important. What this, and this is, just a tool that gets this, let me just read it. Yeah, okay, that was just advertisement. So this tool is also developed by the Static Web Apps team, and that allows you to host your Static Web App locally, along also with the Azure Functions API. It will emulate the authentication authorization part, because that otherwise, once your app is running in production, that part is really executed from the whole infrastructure from Azure. And it also takes routing and configuration into account. And let's take a deeper look at this local development. So generally, you could say the Static Web App CLI mimics a reverse proxy or API gateway, similar to how it would work in once it's deployed. To use that Static Web App CLI, you need to install it as a, usually global tool through npm. And also, usually, the front end, if we're talking about Blazor, that is published at the port 5000, while Azure Functions are exposed on 77.1. Yeah. What happens is that you still run those two separately, but the CLI will glue them together and provide them or expose them under a new port in your browser, localhost 4280. And one thing I think meanwhile they also support 15 and 16, but just as an advice, if you have problems, go check Node version 14. But to also illustrate this a little bit better fully with the diagram, again, if we're coming with a request for /API, then what the Static Web App CLI will do is to route this to the already running Functions core tools runtime, port 77.1. If it's a request to .auth, yeah, any of those will be directed to the emulator. And everything else, static assets, they will go to the Blazor static content server. Okay. So that was too fast, but let's see how this looks. Because now we changed authorization on both sides, and now we can actually take a look how it would behave. And for that, I have to quickly introduce you to a way how this works in Rider with run configurations. Because with those run configurations, again, hopefully you remember, we first need to start our Blazor server, yeah, on port 5000 usually. So this is done through run configuration here, and we just start our Static Web App. But then we also have a second one, yeah, the Azure Functions. Those I have here also as a separate run configuration. It will start the Static Web Apps API. And then we also need to execute this whole line, basically, which glues them together. Yeah? And that is here under Static Web Apps emulator. And you can see this is roughly the same core that I had on my slide. And now, because we want to trigger all of these at once, Rider has this nice functionality, which is called a compound run configuration. And you can see here, I just threw all the run configurations inside that. And now once I select that and run it, then you can see all the 3 run configurations running down here independently of each other. Yeah. The emulator is also ready now, so I can just click here and you can see port for blah, blah, blah. And I'm logged in already, so I will log out again. And now we can go to our Geek joke. We will see, personally, I don't know if Visual Studio has something like that, like run configurations. But let's log in again. We choose GitHub. Now, this is part of the emulator that I was talking about. So I can provide my username. I can just fake it. That's basically just a fake. I can log in and now go to my Geek joke again. And to restore my copy of Microsoft Office, I will find you. You have my word, yeah. So, and I also added a little button, you know, to get another joke and another joke, etc. Yeah, which probably is also interesting to take a look at, because you can see again, I think this is very idiomatic code, because I have a field that basically says if we're currently getting a joke, and if this is true, I want to disable the button, you know, just not to let anyone trigger my API so often. Again, we subscribe to the onClick event to actually say we want to print the joke again. We bind to the button button text also, which tells the user, hold on if it was clicked already, or so funny, get me another one. And also down here, I mean, this is just for demo purpose. What I'm simulating is just to make a request to that API, and also to have some kind of delay here. One thing, because you see, I was giving this presentation also just a couple of days ago at another conference. One thing I also want to show you is if we go here, we can actually change that, and this should reload. And so, yeah, you also have this, you know, I'll be honest, I think this is hot reload. You know, there's so many tiny flavors to that that I heard from time to time. But yeah, I would call it hot reload. Funny flags that you can also pass, but it will update while it's still running. Yeah, that's the point that I want to make. Okay. All right. So that's it about the authentication authorization. What I also want to show you is this unit testing. It's also quite important. I think maybe not at the start, but at a later stage of any project. And for me, my 2 go-to tools are really XUnit. Here, that's the first symbol, and Fluent Assertions. And that we will use for Azure, for Azure Functions. And the last one here, if you haven't seen that symbol before, or icon, that is for BUnit. And BUnit is a framework specifically designed or developed for testing Blazor components and pages also. So let us take a look at that. So let's also stop the execution of our app. So let's take a look at testing the functions maybe at first. So this is separated, you know, how to say, good practice, separated in arrange, act, assert. I also introduced a base class for that to have some methods that help me to create a request, for instance, based from a dictionary. Or there's also another one which creates a request from an object, an anonymous object, or we can also have an empty request and stuff like that. So that was really just on the go, what I thought was nice to have. We also have a base method that allows us to mock an authenticated claims principal. So again, this is the user, yeah. And now you can also see why I was so keen to allow injecting that user through that method, because now we can use our subject on the test, that's SUT, which is the Geek Joke API basically, and pass that information with the request, with the logger, and also with the user into that and execute it, and later basically examine the result. We can also debug that to see what was actually returned. So yeah, now we have the result already, and we could see basically what's happening. Or we can also step into that function. Let me resize that for a bit. So yeah, let's continue. And I think, yeah, test is running fine. For BUnit, or for the Blazor tests, I took the example of, where is it? Sorry, I need to first navigate a little. I took the example of a counter. So since we haven't seen it, it's nothing really fancy, to be honest, but we have a counter and we can click, until when should I go? 100? No. So yeah, this is the counter. And here again, I've separated it into arrange, act, assert, AAA. So first part is again about authorization, although in this case we don't need it. For the component, because you can see this is a generic property from the base class. Again, I just introduced some nice, very, very simple base class to make testing a bit easier, because now I can provide counter as a generic argument for what the subject on the test will be. And I can also introduce extension methods, like in this case, to make the test a bit more readable. For instance, to click the component, click increment, for instance. And you can also see this is typed to counter, so it won't appear in other derived types, etc. And then just checking if the value increased. Yeah. This also allows debugging. In this case, I would just execute it one time, and you can also see it's working. So yeah, I mean, I hear people, although I'm just in this room, I hear people saying, "Come on, make it fail also." So yeah, it can also fail. Okay, but we want everything green, so let me execute it again. Everything green. All right. The next topic. I know one thing I forgot, really. Yeah, because I can't put everything into this talk. This talk was supposed to be more widespread into all kinds of development cycles about static web apps. But if you're interested in BUnit, then make sure to check out the talk from the inventor himself. Unfortunately, I forgot the name, but it was at NDC Oslo, I think, not the last time, but the previous time before. So yeah, make sure to check that out, because it's way more details that you learn in this talk. The last part I want to talk about is deployment, but not limited to that. If you would watch any other talk about static web apps, then you would probably be told about the integration with GitHub and Azure DevOps, and also implied by that, you would also see quite you would also see quite a lot of YAML files being generated. The problem that I had with that in particular, even if I don't look, I mean, it's kind of also motivated through my open source project, But me personally, and that's why I started with my open source project, I don't like YAML. Yeah. Usually, if this was in person, I would ask who loves YAML and who hates YAML. Usually, I mean, you can imagine what the ratio is there. But one thing that is really annoying about that is you don't have a nice integration with other CI providers. Even let's say GitLab or TeamCity. But at the same time, YAML really isn't, if you ask me, it's not great to be extended. So if you happen to just do your deployment with static web apps, then okay, sure, the generated one is fine. But if you want to integrate more than that, like for instance, testing, for instance, also managing your static web apps, then something like Nuke can be much better. And again, this is my open source project that I work on for 5 years already. And you can think of it as some C# make tool. Yeah. I'm sure everyone has heard about make files or Gradle or Fake or Rake and whatnot. This is similar, just with my own touch of how things can work nicely. And something very nice that you will see immediately is that this also allows you to execute things locally, not just like YAML that you first have to commit and then wait a couple of minutes and then see, oh, it's not working again the 20th time because of some indentation. So this works locally. It will also generate the YAML for you if you want. And it also has, I would say, a great development experience. This is what I'm working for, basically, because it's, again, C#, works as a console project also, and can be debugged, has code completion, etc. So for that, we will also take a brief look how it works. And as you can imagine, one thing I want to show you right away. So I'm giving this talk quite often. Yeah, like I said, actually just last week on Friday. Every time I want to show you that in action, etc. Again, I'm starting, and I want to have this reproducible, of course. So every time, like when I start and want to make sure everything is working, then I go ahead and just use Nuke. I have the project already here to reinstantiate another another instance for the static web app to make it dedicated to the conference. So in this case, I could just say Nuke create, and by the way, you could see I have completion there, and then type the name, for instance, and say Solution1. Yeah. So this will now spin up the build project, and in particular the create target. And you can see it invokes the Azure CLI for me, passing a couple of parameters like which resource group that should be, then the template file, the ARM template for the static web app, the name, and the location where it should reside. So usually this takes maybe a minute or so, and it's just the network request that takes so long. Now it's just 30 minutes. But yeah, let's get over here and refresh, and then we should see, if I can scroll here, Solution1. You can also see I was paranoid, so I also instantiated Solution2 already. Maybe I can reuse that next year. By the way, you should definitely do this conference next year again. I really like it. But yeah, this was done from my command line, and I didn't have to deal with remembering the Azure CLI command and whatnot. I just have it implemented, and now I really also want to show you how this is implemented. So for build, for instance, I mean, this is the place where all the targets, the build steps, or generally anything that you want to execute is implemented. We started this one, and you see everything is highlighted in a nice way. You have very few magic strings. Yeah, everything is a symbol, including also the create target itself, because this is really just a property, and you could also rename it, for instance. But let's focus on the other parts here, which is what the YAML usually does is compiling. Yeah, and this call here, for instance, will compile my static web app, so the Blazor part and the function part. Everything nicely as, you know, methods, static APIs that you can call. And we also want to execute the tests that we have here. And here you can already see, because this should happen after compile, you know. And again, if I would write this, you have this nice completion, you don't have typos and etc. And this part here is also really interesting, and I hope you, because usually it takes a bit more time to explain, but I hope you get it. Imagine we had more projects than just the API, the app, but we also had some other tests that we wanted to execute. And maybe we add more and more test projects. You wouldn't need to change anything here, yeah, to execute those tests. Because what this call is doing is, for all the test projects which are up until here yet undefined, we will reset the verbosity, we will set the configuration, also the results directory where the TRX file is supposed to be generated, and then we can combine all of those with all the test project that we can find. Yeah, this call here will combine it up until the amount of test projects that we can find. So if you have 4, then this call here, this whole call, will be responsible for 4 invocations of .NET tests. Yeah, so the equivalent here you can see above. But yeah, this is about the executing tests. Further below here, I also have a target which does the publish part. So it will make sure that static web apps CLI is installed, and then it will make a call to that tool, and provide all the, you know, parameters. This works very similar. Each line basically defines one parameter or one argument that is passed to the CLI. And what is really interesting is that last call here, because what you can see is we're passing the API, the deployment token. And if this was executed on CI, then it would be resolved from this API token, because this will be injected, yeah, automatically for you from the secrets. Usually, just as usual as secrets work in whatever CI provider you have. But this will be injected automatically. But if we're not on CI, then we can fall back to using this call here, get API token. And this is just a way to, one way that I found how to get a token resolved locally, so that I can also deploy from my local machine. And if you care, just also to mention this, if you care and want to set up this in your CI, then there's also a managed deployment token here. Once you navigate to your static web app, and then you can copy it here and fill it in as secret in your CI provider. All right, but now, like I said, we can actually deploy this from locally. No, it's published. So this will take a little bit of time. You see, at first we are compiling. Now first the Blazor part. Let's see. We will take the time just to take a look here. After that, should the API will follow, or Azure Function, then we have executed the first test project, then the second test project, and now we are publishing. And this will take, again, this will take a moment. In the meantime, I want to show you how easy it is about the YAML part. Because for the YAML to be generated, I really just have this one attribute here, which says, okay, I want to execute on GitHub Actions. The workflow should be named like that. It should be executed on this image. And again, you can see auto completion and all that stuff, yeah. When should that happen? On push, which target should be execute, publish, and what secrets should be invoked. You can also very easily, if I wanted to execute this on TeamCity, you also have a separate attribute for that to make it work on TeamCity. This will also generate, in TeamCity, it's not a YAML, but a Kotlin file, but it will be generated for you. And the generated one, if we take a look here, CI, you can see continuous YAML. So this corresponds to what I defined here. And this is all generated. Yeah. For GitHub Actions, it doesn't look so impressive, but I can tell you TeamCity or Azure Pipelines, they have huge YAML files or config files that get generated depending on your build definition. But let's see. Okay, publishing worked, of course. Yeah, I'm confident about that meanwhile. But we can also navigate to our published app here. We can see get joke. Currently, I'm not logged in yet. So let's log in. And now we get the non-emulated version. We grant consent. And let's get back. Geek joke, not authorized. So, again, in person, I would usually ask, what might it be? It's because I don't have the admin role yet. And that is also something that I implemented with Nuke here, because I have one target which helps me to invite a person. So, for instance, I could invite myself, for instance, apply the roles, which is admin, and also the, I think it's called provider. Yeah. And here again, I also have completion for whatever is actually makes sense or is available. Provider, GitHub. Let's execute that. That will again talk to Azure CLI in the background, but I just have a nice way to invoke it. And it also automatically copied the invitation URL to my clipboard, so I actually don't even need to, copy it from there. You could also email it, whatever you want. So now I have the role that is needed or required, and we can see our joke. Okay, yeah, this is a good one. Apparently, because I've seen a couple of jokes repeated over time, so if we have all the blacklist flags, then there's really not much fun left. It seems. But yeah, anyway, I like it. Okay, so that's it about the deployment part. I think, yes. A couple of advanced topics I want to mention at the end here, because we cannot put everything in that talk. That's too difficult. So the first is file compression. This is interesting because I was hosting the website for Nuke before on Azure. So many words. On GitHub Pages, more or less. And GitHub Pages didn't allow file compression. So you couldn't use something like Broadly, for instance, which is funny because just the other day, someone told me that this originates from the fact that it was developed in Switzerland, and originally it was supposed to be named Brötli, but this uses an umlaut, German umlaut, so it ended up Brötli. But Brötli is not supported by GitHub Pages, only in Azure Static Web Apps. And you can think, for instance, about writing a target that compresses all the files while it's running on CI. So then you don't have to do this manually, and it will always be up to date. And that's just one example of what we could do to improve page loading speed. Another example is updating search indexes. So I want to show you one example here. I forgot to open that page before, but I have this page here. This is for Nuke, the website, and I have Algolia integrated. Algolia is a service for searching your website, And whenever you make changes to the content, then of course the search index needs to be updated. I really want to show you this. So let me open the project here, because to make this work, there's a lot of things that have to be done, yeah, to update Algolia. So first, what we need to do is to build our website. Afterwards, we need to create a Docker network. Yeah. Then we need to serve the website that was previously built. Yeah, we need to serve it. Then I don't know, I forgot why I have this sleep inside here, but we are updating some config file also, and then running another Docker instance, which contains the crawler for Algolia, or scraper it's called. And just imagine, and these two communicate through the network then, but just imagine you really had to do this inside your YAML file. Yeah, I think writing this in Nuke like this is very succinct, and you can really see what parameters are passed. And again, you can debug it, etc. But yeah, this is one example. I wouldn't want to write this in YAML, to be honest. So this is one other example where this can really help to update the search indexes. And last one, and could also be its own topic really, is content protection. So we looked at authorization, authentication, but one thing I want to make sure is if your page is running on WASM, so only in the front end, then it doesn't really work that you just wrap your content that you want to protect, like basically paywall, something like this, in a block that says user must be authorized, because the user still has access to all the code, yeah, because it's downloaded, just scrambled somewhere in the assembly files. So one idea that I had, but that I still need to check out, is that, for instance, you could encrypt that content first, inside the assembly. At what point, I don't really know, but encrypt it first with a key. And that key could be only returned to people that are authorized, because only on the backend side, you can be really sure that the person is authorized. Yeah. In the front end, no way, at least to my knowledge. But in the backend, we can know, yeah, because there the user cannot, mess around and fake identities and such. So yeah, this is something to be aware of. Content protection could work in some way, but be aware it's not very simple, probably. Okay, now I want to conclude the whole presentation. I think, like I said at the beginning, I got down the rabbit hole in some sense through static web apps, but eventually I really loved it because this is fast, flexible, and scalable. What's also really nice, and I didn't say it like that during the presentation, but front end and back end work as a unit, and they also are deployed as a unit. So you won't run into situations where one part deployed, the other didn't, and then they don't match or something like that. Also, you have these integrated authentication providers, which is nice because it's we live in 2022, and no one likes if you have to register first and stuff like this. So you can use GitHub, Twitter, and whatnot for authentication. The whole thing from start to last, I think, has a great development experience because we are just in C#. Yeah. Although I have to say I'm a fan that people look into other languages, but I get it. At times it's just nice to stay in your comfort zone. And now you have that in Blazor in the front end, with Azure Functions anyway in the back end, and also with Nuke to do all kinds of deployment and management. And yeah, with that, I want to thank you for attending. I want to thank you also again to the Discord server. I will also have a second talk, actually, I think on Wednesday, about Rider. If you're interested in that, would be nice to see you there or have you there, because I don't see you. Down here is also the link to the repository, and that's my Twitter handle if you want to follow me. And again, thank you very much. Now I will go through the questions. So let me take a look. When you create a new app using Blazor template, using VS, yeah, there it stops already. Does it have Azure Functions out of the box included or out of the book? Probably box, not book. But yeah, I mean, I would assume there's not a template that generates the whole of the. That's the wrong project. To my knowledge, there's no template which would create all of these projects at once. Usually it's just one of each through .NET New. Yeah. So this was created with .NET New. Let's see, list. I think it's Blazor1 is the slug, or how you want to call it. Yeah, Blazor1, and the other was created with. I don't even know if I created it this way. But as a project template in Writer. So I wouldn't know which one I used here, but I'm sure you will find out about this. And maybe it's also just changing the project file here and adding a couple of NuGet packages. Blazor compared to React, what architectural patterns it uses? I can't really tell you. I wasn't a user of React except for what I do on the Nuke website with Dokusaurus, which is a great, absolute great framework for everyone who haven't heard about it. But unfortunately, about a comparison, I cannot give any. Yeah. Also, I haven't looked at most of the others either, to be honest. In which use cases would you not use Blazor for a front-end web application because e.g. of the bundle size for the first load? Yeah, I mean the how to say, this initial load time is really just a problem, to my knowledge, in Blazor1. They do have some ideas how to decrease that, of course, but yeah, the initial hit with Blazor1 isn't nice. Let's say, where is it? So if no, that's not where I want it. The initial load takes a moment, yeah. So let's go back here. So you see this loading all the time. Yeah, not nice. I get it. But yeah, it's something for you to decide. I wouldn't know what's good or bad. With the website that I have, I started using Google Lighthouse to have some benchmarks and so on. But unfortunately, I never run benchmarks on a Blazor1 app. Any NuGet packages you can recommend through your experience with Blazor server? No, also not really. Because yeah, my focus was really just, I mean, I can try to find something, but I hope maybe someone else tells you something in the chat. I mean, that's why we have this Discord server. But otherwise, I haven't checked out anything. I was just interested in that in particular with WASM. And yeah, I hope you understand, because this field is so wide. I wasn't a front-end developer before that, and yeah. Okay, another question. Since Blazor is fairly new compared to React or Angular, do you miss any features right now Microsoft should implement in the future? No, not really. I mean, again, I don't have super exciting real-world how to say, experience with it. But just looking at the list of components and so this looks really promising to visualize all kinds of stuff. And I think it's nice that you can extract those Blazor components into its own files. And yeah, more questions about Blazor in particular. Does WASM full AOT completely solve issues about environment with JIT forbidden, like protected mode and Edge? I have no idea. No idea, sorry. Man, these questions are really detailed, I have to say. Usually, I can tell you, usually I don't get that many questions. So for the next one, I will definitely make sure to research those also a bit on my own. Next year, show up as front-end expert. I don't think so. I'm sorry. But yeah, anyway, I mean, if someone is interested, I have a couple of people that I could still ask later. And if you're really interested and don't find an easy answer, then I can check around. That should be easy. But yeah, I think no more questions at this point. Maybe you also find out that about this part, Blazor, I'm an imposter. But yeah, anyway, I hope this was interesting to you. And again, it was supposed to cover a broad field of Blazor, but also functions and also Nuke for deployment. So I was also lucky that I could tell you a bit about my own work. And again, thank you for watching. I hope you liked it, and we'll see you maybe on Wednesday and maybe next year. So thanks, bye.